panel to discuss grassroots ways to combat anti-Semitism. We have Daniel West Cohen, Director of Partnerships in the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, Zohar Levi Jr. From Stanford University, Jonathan Braun, President of the World Union of Jewish Students, and Darian Uliguyan of UCLA. So I'd like to begin with our representative from the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement. If you could tell us a little bit about the kind of partnerships that the movement has to work sort of with the grassroots, with the general public on anti-Semitism issues.
Great. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me today. We're excited to be here. The Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, as you may know, is a grassroots coalition of over 250 NGOs, all dedicated to addressing anti-Semitism. We have big partners such as Jewish National Fund, American Jewish Committee, Simon Wiesenthal Center, but we also have smaller partners such as the North Carolina Coalition for Israel, Rhode Island Coalition for Israel, who are really just a few people in their free time coordinating to address anti-Semitism and the delegitimization of Israel. What I think is so cool about that is essentially we have these enormous organizations working together with smaller organizations, sharing resources, sharing content, collaborating to coordinate information, and working together in lockstep to make a real difference at a grassroots level.
Thank you. Zohar, could you tell me a little bit about your experiences? I understand that your experience going to university in the US as an Israeli has really informed your sort of activism on this subject.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, my name is Zohar. I'm a rising junior at Stanford studying linguistics, Arabic, and Spanish. And so as a student in the Jewish and pro-Israel community, as well as a student of Arabic, I find myself a lot of the times in conversations with others about identity, politics, and religion, which can be really uncomfortable and difficult. And so I recently published a reflection about my experience in the Stanford Daily newspaper to share my own story about being Israeli and a Zionist, with the hope that by providing another perspective, I could help reduce some of the unfair commentary that Israelis and Israel receive on campus. And so thankfully that has had a lot of really positive responses, both from students on campus as well as professors, other organizations. And so it's been a really big honor to be able to speak. And so thank you again for having me here.
And could you tell me a little bit, are you sort of continuing activism following that public statement that you made? Are there any actions going on your campus?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, I was the president of Stanford Israel Association, which is the pro-Israel club on campus. I'm also the current vice president of Jewish community for the Jewish Student Association. So through that, we do a lot of different events with like Yom Ha'atzmaut, we'll do different holiday stuff. But as far as like Israel in particular, I would say that the biggest thing that we do is just being a body of supporting students. Because many times the students who are interested in social justice, the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, believe that it's just another political conversation about governments or countries. Like people are quick to comment that supporting Israel means supporting racism, colonialism, apartheid, and they don't feel it necessary to actually engage in a dialogue about those feelings. And so as an Israeli American, I often feel that a lot of this rhetoric goes beyond political commentary and really targets my personal identity, our collective identity, and unjustly questions the legitimacy of the state of Israel. And so I've been very lucky to be supported by this network of people, Hillel at Stanford, the Jewish Student Association, the Stanford Israel Association, as I mentioned earlier. And so we try to be that body for other people too. So I would always recommend that other people check out similar groups on their own campus, but we all know that these places on every campus can't always offer that pro-Israel support. And so I have also offered to be a resource for students at other universities, to offer Hillel at Stanford's body to students at other universities. And so we do a lot of activism in the sense that activism is also being proud of your community. It's being open-minded when forming partnerships with friends, mentors, organizations. Activism doesn't always have to be super loud and super immediate. It can be long-lasting. It can be just engaging in dialogue with other people. And so my activism in particular stems from standing in what I believe in. So whether that means being proud of writing an article, whether that means hosting publicly a Yom Ha'atzmaut festival on campus, whether that means filing an act of anti-Semitism or harassment at your school, directly responding to a friend's Instagram story, just grabbing a cup of coffee with someone in your class.
Thank you so much. Sorry, we have a limited amount of time, so I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. Darian, I understand that you come from the Armenian American community, and that's sort of an interesting, unusual connection to this issue. If you could just tell us a little bit how you came to fighting anti-Semitism.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. So yeah, like as you mentioned, I do come from the Armenian American community as well. And throughout my entire collegiate career, I've had the privilege of being able to build bridges on my campus. So whether that was as the president of Bruins for Israel, as the vice president of my Lebanese club, I'm also Lebanese as well. I've been able to do that throughout my entire collegiate career. And now that I've recently graduated, I'm privileged to continue to do that work professionally with passages. And for me, even though I'm not Jewish, the fight against anti-Semitism is something that hits really close to home for me, and it's something that's very personal for me. So like you said, I am a Christian Armenian Lebanese American, so I'm not Jewish either ethnically or religiously, but my stepdad is Jewish, which means that I have wonderful Jewish grandparents that live in New Jersey. And just a few years ago, my grandmother actually shared a story with me that really shook me to my core. So when she was a young girl, she was raised in a fairly observant, conservative Jewish household. And one day on Yom Kippur, actually, when she was going to her family, when she was going to shul with her family, as she was walking up the stairs to the entrance, there were some boys who were calling her and her family extremely derogatory anti-Semitic names and yelling a whole bunch of obscenities at them, but she ignored them. And she was only able to ignore them up to a point. Because as she was about to enter into the shul, her and her family began to be pelted with rocks and stones that were being thrown by the same people who were yelling these obscenities at her. And so, simply because of the fact that she was Jewish, and so now when I hear this story, some people think, yeah, Darian, but that was decades ago. Like we've moved past that, but have we? How can I say that we've moved past that when UCLA student body president 2 years ago, who had a mezuzah placed on her office door, had it torn down twice in the span of 1 year? How can I say that when a Persian Jewish student is told by a guest lecturer that she's guilty of white supremacy simply because she believes the state of Israel should exist as a Jewish democratic state? But I think there's a positive to all of this. I am here as an example of a Christian who clearly sees the evils of anti-Semitism and has invested countless hours into this Jewish community. But my story is not extremely unique. I'm one of many. At this point, there's been thousands of Christian college students who have traveled to Israel, like myself, learned about the deep roots of Christianity in Judaism, experienced the complexities of the region for themselves, and came back energized to stand with the Jewish community. By the thousands, we're coming to terms with the horrors that have been done to the Jewish people in Christ's names and are seeking to eradicate this anti-human hatred.
Well, thank you so much. It's a really interesting and touching story. With the time we have left, I'd really like to hear from Jonathan from WUJS, the World Union of Jewish Students. If you could tell us a little bit, give us a global perspective. Are the challenges that Jewish students face on U.S. campuses similar to those that are being faced around the world?
So hi, everyone. Thank you again for having us. So it's a little bit of time to talk about the whole world, but mainly, and that's the difficulty I think about it, anti-Semitism has many faces, and it can be very different from campus to campus in the US, so even more different between countries. So you would see very different anti-Semitism in Europe, for example, that is very much connected today to either all the bigotry coming from World War II and the global concepts of the Jews are filthy rich, or the Jews rules the media and this kind of things, where in the US or South Africa, for example, it would be way more connected to the Israeli apartheid narrative, or the discrimination between Palestinians and Israelis, this kind of Israeli anti-Zionism becoming anti-Semitism story. The work we're trying to do to help very different stories and very different campuses is taking a bit of everything that was said here before, and I think that's wonderful. A lot of students are willing to put their hands and time and energy to try and change the narrative, try and tell a different story, because often what is lacked for a lot of students is the story on the other side that Jews were reticent to tell for a long time. And it's not to anyone else to say what is Zionism for us. It's not for anyone else to say what does being a Jewish student means. And it's time for us to own our narrative. And I hope more and more students will join this part of the story and take the example we have here in this panel with following the leadership that's been on their campuses. And we work at the World Union of Jewish Students to try and empower them, give them the tools and opportunities, and hopefully keep doing that on another level.
Well, on that note, that optimistic note and that call to action, we will end this panel. Thank you, everyone, so much for the work you're doing and for telling us about it today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.